The MAX is back. The FAA clearing Boeing 737 MAX to fly again. The fleet has been grounded for nearly 2 years after crashes killed a total of 346 people. Boeing shares giving up early gains in the news and closing in the red. Our Phil LeBeau joins us now with all the details. Hey, Phil.
You know, Melissa, this stock was up, I think, about 24% in the 5 days leading into today. I mean, everybody's known that the MAX was going to be ungrounded soon by the FAA. So there was no surprise in the announcement today. Nonetheless, this was a stock that, you know, boy, nice move that they've had since middle of October, end of October, and you're seeing that reflected in the stock trading over $200 a share. Just to bring you up to speed, and I know you talked about this, Melissa, how long ago it was that the MAX had the first accident. Look at this timeline of what this plane has gone through. The first crash was more than 2 years ago, and then it spent much of last year. The company was going through investigations on Capitol Hill, hearings, uncovered damaging details about the development of the MAX, as well as the relationship between Boeing and the FAA. And then earlier this year, that's when things really started to change. It was actually late last year, earlier this year, that you had these text messages that came out about engineers at Boeing and mocking the FAA. New CEO Dave Calhoun stepped in and said, okay, shut down production. We're going to have to cut the enrollment by at least 12,000. This was Boeing finally saying, what do we need to do to bring this home, to get the MAX recertified? Then you had Steve Dixon doing a test flight in late October. And then today, finally, the ungrounding of the 737 MAX. We've talked all day about Boeing and how much it means to the company. But don't forget, there are a couple of important suppliers here. You got GE Aviation, along with its partner Safran, the CFM International joint venture. They make the engines. Look at the stock move that you've seen for GE. And then you've got Spirit Aerosystems out of Wichita, Kansas. They make the fuselage. Now, a lot of the engines and fuselages, there's some inventory there. It's not like they're just going to ramp up production, but you will start to see them gradually improve production over the next 12 months. As for the airlines, American will start flying the MAX December 29th. That's the first scheduled flight from New York down to Miami, and then gradually they'll add more flights over time. And then you have United. It plans to start flying the MAX in the first quarter. And Melissa, this is what we're going to see not only with the U.S. airlines, but airlines around the world. They will gradually get these planes updated, new software, get the pilot training procedures in place, have the pilots go through the simulators, and over the next 6 months to a year, you'll start to see the MAX move into these fleets.
All right, Phil, thank you. Phil LeBeau, keeping on top of Boeing. Tim, of course, you fast pitched Boeing November 10th, and since then, shares are up more than 15%. So what do you make of this news? Particularly, I mean, Phil had outlined what still faces the company. There are various probes, a DOJ probe, an SEC investigation. A lot of the planes still need to be inspected. The ones that were manufactured that are in storage need to be inspected, and there need to be FAA-mandated fixes still made to them. So there's a lot ahead still for this company.
Boy, you made it. I don't even know how this thing got past the team with that negative buildup. But you're right. And if, in fact, this news didn't do anything to price targets on the street, and it was a little bit of a head fake for investors if you thought this was a breakthrough moment. It's a continuation in a very painful, difficult, almost embarrassing moment for the company. And the reality is capacity and demand for planes hasn't changed at all. That is changing around the COVID vaccine news we've been getting. And interestingly enough, airlines were actually up today despite the fact that Boeing ultimately gave back and finished in the red on this news. Boeing still has 450 planes to find homes for. And, you know, the question is, how opportunistic will the buyers be to try to get price concessions? And this is something that I think Boeing's going to have to really fight. And again, the Airbus A320 is a more popular plane to begin with, and they don't have a lot of leverage to fight on this one. But it's about free cash flow with Boeing, and arguably we're still a ways away from that. But the recovery will be priced into the stock. So I stay long the stock, and I think it's you know, the timeline with the vaccine is part of that story.
If the biggest unknown, Karen, is now known in terms of when it can return to flight, is this a turnaround story that you can invest in?
I don't know. Let me push back a little and say, is it the biggest unknown, or is the biggest unknown how healthy will the airlines be and how able will they be to financially to implement all of that buying that we thought we saw? Some of it we will see, but some of it's been delayed. So I don't know. So I don't completely accept your premise, but I don't own Boeing is the short answer.
I like how you went after the premise, Guy. How do you feel about that premise?
It's interesting she brings that up. I mean, I could make the best lemonade in the world, but if people aren't thirsty, as they say in the business, you're sort of SOL, right? And I think that's what Karen's point is in terms of Boeing. And listen, I do think this is a turnaround story. And by the way, Tim Power pitched it, and it's up 15%, but he was in the bullpen with that sucker long before. So good for him, and good for him being steadfast. But I think even Tim would agree, on a day where Boeing trades 3 times normal volume, trades up to basically the June high and reverses, that's a bit concerning. The same, by the way, with Spirit Aerospace. If you go and look at that chart, it's the same exact thing on 3 times normal volume. So although I think the analysts will wind up being right, the question is, where does it trade first? And I think given the tape, given the reversal, given the volume, given the news that's out, I think it's reasonable to see it back down to 175, 180, and then you buy it again.
All right. So what does Boeing's ungrounding mean for airlines? Let's bring in Sheila Kayaglu, Jefferies analyst. She joins us on the fast line. Sheila, great to have you with us. I'm going to start off with a question that I posed to the panel here in terms of the biggest unknown. And for you, what do you think the biggest unknown is at this point? Is it whether or not people will return to flying?
I think the biggest unknown is removed, Melissa. And, we were waiting for 2 catalysts. One was the vaccine, and 2 was the MAX airworthiness directive. And I think why today is such a big deal, even though it was known, is it's going to remove $14 billion of inventory on Boeing's balance sheet over the next 3 years. So for us, that's positive. We just actually initiated on the airline sector yesterday. Our call here is you want to buy domestic airlines, so Southwest first, over internationally exposed airlines. And that's where the narrow bodies like the 737 MAX flies to, because that's where we think traffic will return to normalized levels by 2023. So I think some of the biggest unknowns are actually removed now.
Do you feel confident that airlines won't look for concessions with regard to price on these planes that have been mothballed in the desert for months and months?
For sure. That's a big reason why we took our Boeing free cash flow number down massively in October. Is we had about $5 billion or so free cash flow generation for 2021. Now we're down $3 billion. And a lot of that, Melissa, is because these airlines already prepaid some of what they were expected to receive. So those prepayments are going to be a lot smaller next year. And it's a big $4 billion headwind to Boeing next year. So those concessions are being factored in.
Sheila, something that Tim says, and I've talked about as well. I mean, do they get any credit, they being Boeing, for their basically their defense component of their company? It seems to me, I mean, maybe the last couple of weeks notwithstanding, that portion of the company was being devalued entirely.
Agree. I think that investors have had a significant risk tolerance appetite as the vaccine has come in, and seen the multiple obviously re-rate on Boeing, and the discussions on normalized free cash flow are super.
Sheila, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time. Sheila Kayaglu of Jefferies. Steve, since you love Would You Rather, I'll throw that back at you. Boeing or the airlines?
Well, I don't own Boeing, and I do own Spirit, and I like the way she sort of navigated that and narrated the story that international will be slower to recover, domestic will be faster. So she had picked LUV. I have SAVE, Save Spirit Airlines. I'm staying along that one. I would look to make some sales in Boeing, although congratulations to Tim, and it definitely broke out of this recent trading range. But I do see, I don't know, if I had to be aggressive, I could say 165, this thing coming back in, because there's no real reason for it to rip higher than what Guy said, that high that we've seen a couple of months ago in June of 234. I do like the fact that they have a defense, a space, and a security business that earns them over 26 billion per year. But the commercial plane side is over 30 billion, probably not coming on as quick as we would like.
In the airline trade, Tim, I'm curious, what's the winning force? Is it the vaccine news, or is it the rising COVID cases that we're facing right now?
Or it's investor sentiment. I mean, you've gotten to a place where we're no longer, and the updates, if you listen to the airlines, were not about liquidity anymore, right? They're about recovery. They're about, when you begin to see, and we're capacity makes a little bit more of a sense, but it's not even really that conversation. So I just think a change in sentiment is part of where airlines are going to go. They were untouchable for most people. And I think you've gotten to a place where we're not, again, we know where liquidity is for all the major carriers through 21, which at least for now is enough confidence, I think, to wade in and make assessments about whether these guys can. No one's talking about normalized earnings here. They are talking about that in other sectors. No question leisure recovers, as the analyst just talked about. So that's Allegiant, that's even Southwest before the big international business travels. And there's a lot of expectation that that doesn't come back overnight. But the trade is about the change in sentiment and the recovery beginning to be priced in. You don't stay here forever, but I think there's still a ways to go.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.